The title is The Global Order Revisited, Old Actors and New Alliances. And I'm going to introduce now the distinguished panel as they make their way to the stage. The Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar, His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani. The Prime Minister of Somalia as well, His Excellency Hassan Ali Khayre. The President, again, of the United Nations General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces. The Foreign Minister of Romania, His Excellency Teodor Viorel Milascana. And the moderator of this distinguished panel is Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger, the chairman of the Munich Security Conference. And those speakers are making their way to the stage now for the next panel. We said it was about networking as well, didn't we? That's what we're seeing is networking. Okay. Turn it on. Turn it on. I know, but if we could have all of our speakers for the next panel, again, make it to the front, to the stage. But we did say this is about networking as well, so. I believe the ambassador is about ready to start the dialogue for this next panel. And again, it is the Global Order Revisited, Old Actors, New Alliances. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the ambassador.
Well, good morning. Good morning, and I hope everybody can find their seats again so that we can get started in just a few seconds. Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Wolfgang Ischinger. I've had the privilege of organizing and chairing the Munich Security Conference, which today at this year's Doha Forum is one of the partners of the Doha Forum, and I'm extremely proud of that fact. In fact, the Munich Security Conference and Qatar have had a close relationship now for 7 or 8 years, because one of our first ventures outside of Germany was here in Doha in 2011, so 7 years ago. It's a pleasure to be here, and we will be discussing for the next hour with a brilliant panel the state of the world and the enormous power shifts that are creating all sorts of disruptions and problems for, I think, all of us, regardless of whether we are in the Middle East or in Europe or in Latin America or elsewhere. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me very, very briefly, because you know that these panelists really don't need an introduction, let me briefly introduce them. Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces doesn't need an introduction because she's just spoken a few minutes ago. She, of course, represents the global view, if I may say so, this morning, as the current president of the UN General Assembly, foreign minister of her native country of Ecuador. Now, to her left is sort of our host foreign minister and deputy prime minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani. He is an old hand in foreign policy because he was in a number of positions in the foreign ministry before he was promoted to foreign minister, and then more recently, a year ago, to deputy prime minister. It is important for everybody to know that Sheikh Mohammed is also the chair of the Qatar Investment Authority and of the Qatar Development Fund. So it's a great pleasure to have you here as representing the host country. And then we go to Africa, and I'm very pleased to have Prime Minister Hassan Ali Khair from Somalia with us. When you see his CV, you can see that Somalia has had a difficult history. He spent many years of his life more or less as a refugee, but then working on refugee issues in Norway. So, Mr. Prime Minister, we're really happy to have you here this morning. And last not least, I'm welcoming the Foreign Minister of Romania. Romania is in less than 3 weeks from now going to assume the presidency of the European Union. So you have in front of you the senior-most representative of the European Union for the next 6 months. And really a pleasure to have you here. Foreign Minister Melescanu has had a very, very long and distinguished career. He served as foreign minister when I was still a very junior diplomat in my own country, so it's a pleasure to have you. Now, we agreed that we wouldn't want to make long introductory speeches, but what I thought I should try to do with these 4 panelists is to talk a little bit about not only the good news. The good news is that millions of people have emerged from poverty, that there is now eradication of diseases increasingly. But as we see the progress of humanity, we also see before our eyes, as we speak in the present time, a worrisome number of bloody conflicts, a worrisome loss and lack of mutual trust. That's true in this region. That's actually also true in my part of the world, in our part of the world, when I think of the crisis, the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. We have shooting going on right in the heart of Europe. So the question is really how are we dealing with these accelerating changes and power shifts in the world? What about the United States and its traditional role? Are we going to have to live without the kind of leading role which the United States has played for generations? What about China and its increasingly essential role in global politics? What about Russia? What about Turkey? What about Iran? The Foreign Minister of Iran is here with us today. What about the problems here in the region? The blockade on this country, the role of Saudi Arabia? And finally, what about the European Union? What are expectations from this region vis-à-vis Europe? Are we doing enough? Are we contributing enough in terms of conflict prevention, conflict management, etc.? So let's focus not so much on, what happened and why. Let's try to focus on what actually needs to be done by us and by the big powers who may not be present, all of them in this hall this morning. What should happen in order for trust to be reestablished, in order for conflicts to be managed better, to be ended more quickly, or even better, to be prevented before they break out? So we have, of course, a view from the Middle East. We have a global view from the President of the General Assembly. We have a view from Africa, and we have a view from Europe. And with your permission, Madam President, I'll start with the representative of the host country, Sheikh Mohammed. Please, let us share a few thoughts with us, what your expectations are of the region and of all of us.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wolfgang. I would like, first of all, to allow me to welcome all the guests who are represented here, and we are very happy to have Doha Forum 18th edition with such a distinguished audience, and we welcome the contribution of everybody who are participating with us today and tomorrow. We believe that this is also serving as a platform for dialogue and for engagement, a platform that bring up some ideas. Maybe it won't be adopted by some of the governments, but at least it will enlighten a lot of policymakers in whenever they are thinking about reshaping their policy. Ambassador, you were just mentioning about the role of the big countries, China, Russia, United States, and the change in dynamics in Europe and the European Union. There is, as the theme of this plenary, you mentioned that this is a global order being revisited. We believe this is, yes, it's a global order being revisited, but it's not something that it's new to us. It's a cycle which is every few years or few decades it's being recycled, and just the time frame of these cycles has been shortened. And this is given for multiple factors, but mainly if you will think about the technology, the connectivity, the communication, has been a major contributor to shorten these cycles of change. So now the information doesn't need days or months to reach from China to United States, just needs a part of the seconds, microseconds. So we believe that this is a main contributor for the change in the global order, and for the change of the view of the countries in shaping their alliances. When you also refer to how regional alliances are now replaced by cross-continental alliances, this is a very interesting point because the regional alliances are still valid and still very important because the regions always sharing the same common concern and common interest. They are sharing a common threat for their people, and anything is harming any of the neighbors in the same region is a harm for his country and for his own nation. But we believe that this entire system of governance between those alliances need to be revisited, and this is where we can contribute. And this is not only, it's not the contribution of big countries and superpower, but it's a contribution also for all member states in the United Nations, all member states as part of the region. Our countries who are here on the stage 20, 30 years ago, they were just, you hear about Qatar as a tiny state in the Arabian Peninsula, that it's like just a tip on this, and most of the audience, especially from the West, maybe they never heard about Qatar. 30 years later, now everybody knows as Qatar as minaret of enlightenment in this region. When we brought a new education system, we brought a new way of conducting free media and free expression. When we brought all these new values to this region, this is something that Qatar was pioneering. And now also, when you think about Qatar as a platform for energy and energy supplies for the world, we are blessed with resources, but also we are bringing lights now from Japan to United Kingdom. And this is all with clean energy, with the supply of the LNG. If you will think about Somalia is a country which is suffering from a civil war. But if you will look at it in the last couple of years, there is a leadership and determination to change the status quo over there and to bring peace and to provide development. Prime Minister Hassan Khairi, President Farmajo, all of them, they came with a new vision of reforming their country, of reconstructing their country, and even looking at reconstructing their human capital by bringing their diaspora back, trying to attract them, to attract those Somalian talents, great talents who are living outside, to come and to contribute to their economy. Romania was 20, 30 years ago, if you will look at it, was locked behind an iron curtain. And 3 weeks from now, they are going to lead in shaping the EU policy. Ecuador, beside their exports of beautiful flowers and chocolates, they have their representative as the president of the General Assembly. And she's contributing in sustainable development goals. She's coming with an agenda that what matters to small states and to small countries, and to make the UN relevant for them. So if you look at the players are different, if you look at the regional alliances are different, if you are looking at the cross-continental alliances is different. What make those factors different, we believe that our contribution, the way we can participate in shaping the future of those regional alliances, in shaping the way that the governance between the countries in the region, we need a new arrangements in our regions, in all the regions and the cross continents that have full participation of countries, that have full submission to a governance system that it's binding for everybody and every country, and everybody should respect these rules that is governing the relationship. And we need both. We need the regional and we need the cross-continent. We need the UN and we need the regional umbrella as well. So anything cannot be resolved under the regional umbrella can go to the UN and can have, they can come up with a resolution out of it. So it is a challenging time, but we believe that we can contribute positively to this challenging time.
Thank you very much, Foreign Minister. Let me push you just a little bit further regarding the blockade which your country is suffering. Could you tell this audience whether you think that the outside world, we Europeans, the UN, other powers, are giving you enough help to overcome this significant difficulty for your country? Are you seeing the rest of us as helpful, or are you seeing us more as bystanders who watch, what's going on?
Well, if you will look at the GCC crisis and the background of this crisis, everybody now realize that it was a baseless crisis. It was based on lies, it was based on crimes, it was based on fabrication of fake news and creating a propaganda to create fear among the people. And this is also, the technology played a big part of this crisis. So it's a cyber warfare, it's an economic warfare, and we see that there is a stubbornness throughout the last 18 months. There is no any engagement. There is no any form of dialogue between us and the other GCC countries. Now, when you look at the different countries' position, and especially when it comes to the West, to the United States, and the others, we understand very well that all those countries' interests are tied to the stability of the GCC as one bloc. And we believe that we are more relevant as a bloc for those countries than we are than our separation and our fragmentation. And this is a difficult position that all the countries they've been in. We understand this and we acknowledge this very well. And we know that those countries, they have their interests with each of our countries. But what we didn't actually like at this time, especially at the beginning of the blockade, when we saw that those values which were promoted by the West and adopted by the West were just jeopardized in this crisis, and no one was talking about it. And this is a message that we took to the West right away when we saw them that they are not talking about the human rights violation, they are not encouraging to resolve all the violations of the international law happened against our country and our people. We carried on. We moved on with our economy. We moved on with our life. I mean, our country reopened the new routes of trade, new routes of airspace. We have an economic growth in our country, but still the social aspect is existing here. And we still don't see much movement or much encouragement from the Western forces that they encourage at least to resolve those social issues and the fragmentation of families. We're still relying on our region, that our region will bring this back together. The Emir of Kuwait has played a huge role and a leadership role in calming down the situation and containing the situation, which is highly appreciated by Qatar and by the Qatari people. We continue counting on his role and on the role of other countries in our region, bring this back together. We know this might need some time. Politically, it will be resolved. Maybe among the people, it will need. It has been now. It's a becoming very deep wound for the people that it's not easy to recover in just short period. But we still remain faithful that engagement will bring back things together, will bring back relation which is based on mutual respect of each country's sovereignty, on a mutual interest, and that the countries will come back together against the common threat.
Thank you very much. Madam President, you spoke very eloquently just a few moments ago about what's going on at the United Nations, at the global level, your own personal efforts. But let's face it, we have had 7 years of war in Syria. We have now 4 years of unresolved conflict in Ukraine. We've had the civil war in Somalia. We'll talk about it in just a minute. We have a huge number of other conflicts which have not been successfully addressed or managed or concluded. So just take a minute or two, if you could, to tell us how what you think should happen in order for the UN, including, of course, not only the General Assembly, but also the Security Council, to be more capable of performing the job that it was created to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you to our moderator, dear panel colleagues, dear minister. It's really an honor to be here, and I had a written speech. That would be the easiest for me to read the speech, but since you ask, very direct and difficult questions, I have to say, perhaps a few thoughts on that. I'm always asked, why is that the United Nations does not solve or is not able to solve this ongoing conflicts such as Syria or Yemen? Why is that you don't solve the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar? And there are so many, listed conflicts, and the world expects the United Nations to deliver. But I think that the United Nations is the expression or the reflection of the international community in a way. And I perhaps would like to share 3 or 4 thoughts here. One is that we live in a world of paradox in a way, because we have now all the technologies, we have all the knowledge and the information in order to address all the critical issues that we are facing. Not only conflict, Ambassador, but the issues, for example, such as climate change. Climate change is an existential challenge. This is going to either allow us to continue to live and survive as a species, or just disappear from planet Earth, or address the issue of health, of food security, the issue of combating poverty and inequality. And I think that when you look at conflict and the existing conflicts in nowadays, we have to remember and recommit to the very principles of the Charter 73 years ago, which is to look from a holistic perspective, the very close interconnection between the peace and security pillar, the development pillar, and the human rights pillar. So I think that we are lacking this holistic and interconnected view of things. So that's perhaps one of the missing links. I think that the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda helps a great deal to have this overarching holistic view and approach. The other missing link, if we know what is happening, if we have the technology, if we have the information, why is that we don't act? We need to act. But then what holds us back from acting and for addressing the pressing challenges of the world? And I think that this is very much connected to political determination and political will. But then how you qualify political will, it's a very difficult issue. And how I think that we are all aiming at a rules-based international system. We all aim at having a governance structure and a global governance structure that can deliver for the people in need, for the most vulnerable, for the victims of conflict. But yet, we have something holding us back. And there is no simple answer on that. Whether it be very concrete, economic interest. Let's look at the arms race, for example. Yeah. How much money the world invests in getting armed with more sophisticated technologies. And what are the financial and economic interests behind that? What is the political will? What is, our sometimes incapacity to really use dialogue and understanding as a very strong tool. The minister was just mentioning that as well. And I would say perhaps two issues. First, I think that the issue that you mentioned, Excellency, regarding the need of regional alliances, of regional dialogue, of the role of local governments, it's extremely, extremely important. The understanding that when we drafted the UN Charter 73 years ago, the emerging actors were not there yet, but now they are here, and we need to take in full consideration the enormous importance of civil society, of the private sector, of academia, of workers' unions around the world. So it's not only about the willingness of member states themselves. And finally, the role of the United Nations. The primary responsibility of the Security Council is, to prevent and address peace and security issues. And so lately we have seen that more and more the General Assembly takes over unresolved issues from the Security Council and has to address them in order to expedite or have a response to critical issues, such as the Palestinian issue, for example. So I think that the United Nations is or has to strengthen its delivery capacity. We are working on that. The United Nations is indeed the world umbrella, the most representative and democratic, speaking about the General Assembly, and most democratic organ of the multilateral system. I think we need to give greater authority to this Parliament of Humanity. The General Assembly is the Parliament of Humanity, is the place where we do norm setting for international law, and it has to really regain power and force. And we need to also have greater balance between the power of the Security Council, our Parliament of Humanity, which is the General Assembly, and our Social and Economic Council. We also need to implement the very ambitious and structural reform process the United Nations is undergoing. That's why when I selected a theme for this year's General Assembly, I was very pleased to come up with this phrase, making the United Nations more relevant to all. Our organization needs to be more relevant to the people we serve. We need to be closer to the people we serve, and we need to bring the people we serve closer to the United Nations. So there are no easy feats, no easy answers, but I think that the multilateral system and a rules-based international governance system is what we need, even in difficult times. And just to end, perhaps, something that is very important. We are now listening all these very strong narratives saying, is either you go with globalization and multilateralism and the United Nations, or you serve your national interest and you exercise your national sovereignty. And it so happens that both concepts, both categories do not counter each other. They are mutually reinforcing. If you have a peaceful and sustainable world order and a democratic world order, then that reasserts your capacity to exercise your national sovereignty and pursue your national interests. So both things can work together, and they are mutually reinforcing.
Thank you very much. I want to just let our audience know that in about 10 minutes or less, after the two other panelists have had a chance to speak, we will turn to you for your questions and comments. So prepare yourselves, if you would, mentally. My next question goes to the Prime Minister of Somalia. I'd just like to invite you to share a few thoughts about how you, from a war-torn country and as a former immigrant in Norway, how you see the global situation and what should happen in order not to have cases like your own country again, which suffered for so many years, so terribly, from this awful civil war situation. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Very good question. I want to thank first the Foreign Minister and His Highness for their warm reception. Thank you for the great hospitality. And I am again here this year as well. So this shows the importance that we are putting into this gathering, we from Somalia, because this reflects the current reality in terms of political debate that we want to take part of. Let me start first, before I answer your question, by saying in terms of an interconnected world, Somalia may be best represents the easiest example. We are the gateway between Africa and Middle East. We're the only nation in the world that connects the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. Our neighbors are Somalis to the side of Ethiopia, because you have 7 million Somalis in Ethiopia. Djibouti, they are most of them Somalians, and then you have 4 to 5 million Somalis maybe in Kenya. That places us in a strategic location. On top of that, people see Somalia as a war-torn nation, but in terms of a potentiality from resources on economic potentiality, on agriculture, on fisheries, on geographical location in terms of strategic location, on potential oil and gas and minerals and what have you, and our people who are now living globally, gives and puts Somalia in a strategic location in that aspect. Now, in order for us to maintain the progress we've made so far, we cannot do that unless we work with our neighbors, either they are in Ethiopia or in Kenya or in Djibouti, because our progress is interlinked with their progress. Now, how do we intend to carry that forward? Let's take, for example, the traditional relationship we've had with Ethiopia and the relationship we now have with Ethiopia. Our thinking is as follows. There are 7 million Somalis, originally Somalis, who live in Ethiopia, who are Somali Ethiopians. And if we don't have good relationship with Ethiopia, it actually in reality means not having good relationship with Somalis. Second, they represent the biggest market we have as a potential business partner in the future, being 100 million people. Three, the only way we can have border security is if we have a strong relationship with Ethiopia. Look at the case of Kenya. Our business is 100% interlinked with Kenya. Our economic growth, economic development, and sustainability in terms of security. Now, investing in Somalia means, in reality, investing in the region. Bringing about stability in Somalia means bringing about stability in the region. How do we prevent crises like the ones that we've had in Somalia for the past 20 or 30 years? It again comes back to the reality of how do we invest as global leaders. Somalia today stands in a position where we've made progress on political formation, on economic growth, on security. But the issue is that the world has been focusing on terrorism and how to fight terrorism in nations like Somalia. You cannot defeat terrorism through military means alone. You defeat them through investing in political processes, through creating jobs, through fighting corruption, through inclusive politics where women, youth, vulnerable groups are empowered through putting system where people's hope and aspirations are seen through systems that they can recognize. How does, therefore, the world we live in today reflect the current realities? And why are we seeing new alliances made that are being made? The first, I think, question we need to look into, how can we address the growing unilateralism and protectionism policies that are being formed globally? How do we address the question of competition that is becoming what is replacing cooperation? How do we again find a solution to the real reality of that? Is today's multilateral institutions, either being the UN Security Council, do they reflect the current world structure? Are they able to cater for the challenges we're facing? These are questions that we will need to answer. And how do we relate to organizations like the African Union that are becoming increasingly important, and how do we put emphasis into that? Finally, the biggest challenge that we see now from our end is that how do we change old narrative? People have this view, for example, of Somalia, of being a nation of piracy and terrorism, with leaders who are not able to lead their people. Things have changed, and our number one priority, therefore, is how do we make the world understand they shouldn't see Somalia for what it has been or what it is, but what it can be in the future, so that we can contribute to the world.
Thank you very much. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. So, for a final comment, initial comment, let's go to Europe. Mr. Foreign Minister, my own view has been for a long time that our organization, the European Union, hasn't been performing in the way it should perform to defend and represent the interests of 500 million people. Where was the EU in the Syrian conflict, for example? Where do we exercise the role that we could exercise with our economic power in efforts to resolve conflicts? So your country, your government, you yourself are going to take the helm of the EU in a few weeks. So share with us, if you could, your view as how you want to take the European Union forward in these 6 months, which are, I think, going to be hugely important when you think of what's going to happen in the next 6 months in Europe. Brexit is a disruption. We have a whole number of other issues. I'm not going to bore the audience with it. So enormous challenges for the European Union. Mr. Minister.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, let me tell you that I'm very honored to be invited and to attend this forum. And I would like to ask Sheikh Mohammed to convey to His Highness the Emir our appreciation for the excellent organization and the very friendly offer for our stay here. I will permit myself to open a discussion in a very candid way and be direct, attacking the subject you have mentioned. From my point of view, the most successful project in international relations was the creation of the European Union. It was for the first time that different countries, sometimes confronted with wars and crises and disputes, managed to create a unity which was based on a single market, customs union, freedoms of movement of persons, goods, capitals, and so on. There is also the it's difficult to imagine that so many countries accepted at a certain moment to have a single currency, which was practically one of the main elements of the national sovereignty for every country. That's why I have to recognize that the European Union is the most successful project in the international affairs. But we are realizing every day that we can't do a lot of things without a strong relationship with our transatlantic partners, with our partners from the East, with our partners from the West. We should not look at the European Union as a castle, a fortified castle with great walls around us. We are depending very much on our partners, as I said, be they transatlantic to the east or to the south. From this point of view, we are confronted with the same dangers, challenges at the international level as the other countries. That's why the European Union should be much more interested in finding solutions for all these issues. You were referring to different specific situations in which the European Union did not use its real possibilities, the potential to be involved in these issues. From this point of view, for our presidency, we announced this week the priorities for our presidency. There are two elements which are, from our point of view of Romania, a priority. The first one, ensuring the security of the Europeans inside and outside. And secondly, transforming the European Union in a global actor. I think we have all the possibilities to do that, provided we have the political will to use the instruments at our disposal. From this point of view, one of the priorities of our presidency will be the connection with the eastern part of the continent and looking into the Arab world, Central Asia. And one of the issues which are now still very hot, the problem of the disputes between the GCC countries. From our point of view, our intention is to try to organize an event with the countries members of the GCC and to try to contribute with all our possibilities to find a political solution to this. I'm sorry to say we were very preoccupied by the crisis which existed, because we always looked at this JCC format as being a pillar of security in the Arab world. And from our point of view, of course, if it's not working well, it can create a lot of problems in the future. I'm very confident that the capabilities of our countries, first of all of our hosts, are very big. And I'm looking forward with a lot of hope for having an attempt to find a political solution to this crisis. We are supporting the function of moderator of Kuwait, and we hope things will evolve in a positive manner. With your permission, because as I said from the very beginning, I will speak very candidly, I think this crisis, looking from outside to the situation of Qatar, brought a lot of difficulties, but also opportunities. A few weeks ago, we paid an official visit here in Qatar, and we were really shocked by the strong development of some branches of the economy. We visited a dairy factory here, a very modern one of the most modern, which are covering the needs of Qatar, but also is able to export to other countries. And secondly, a very important issue, more accent on your behalf on opening your relations with the world. From this point of view, I appreciate, because it is demonstrated that a country should not be big one in order to play a role. Maybe sometimes the army is not the only argument for being very important in the international relations. But if you have the will, the cleverness, the intelligence of it, you can play a very important role, and we are counting on you, and please count on us for finding solutions. From this point of view, as I said, the European Union, yes, we can do more. We have a system which is working with the High Representative for Foreign Affairs. Our obligations as a President of the Council of the European Union is to help them and to offer all the conditions. And one of our priorities, I repeat, will be the opening of our relations and increasing our relations with Central Asia, with the Gulf countries, with the Arab world as a whole. That's why I'm confident that we will be able to do it. We'll have a chance to organize a meeting, a high-level meeting. I'm speaking about the level of heads of states, of governments in Romania, 9th of May in Sibiu, and the main subject we will discuss there, it's an informal summit, but the main subject which will be discussed, it's about the future of Europe. What should Europe do in order to really play a much more important role, taking account the number of the population, the place in the international economy, and the very important developments in the field of peace and security. Let me inform all the participants that one of the from our point of view, a crucial decision of the European Union was to create a global strategy for defense and foreign affairs. And we have the instruments, and we have decided to use them, and Romania will contribute to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Let me make a little advertisement. I think in mid-February in Munich, when many of you will be assembled at the Munich Security Conference, that's a good place to prepare your summit for May. So we'll try to help advance this. Now, we have time for just a couple of questions. We have less than 10 minutes to go. I see somebody here in the third row. If you could please grab a microphone and let us know whether you have a question to the entire panel or to one of the panelists. And please ask a brief question. Don't give us a long speech. The gentleman here, yes. Is there a microphone?
Thank you. I'm Kazem Sajjadpour from Iran. I was impressed by the panel. But the question that you asked in the beginning, the set of questions, one of the most important one was about the United States. And I didn't hear anything about United States. My question is, when we talk about unilateralism or about the crisis that we had here, where is US and how the world can manage the new US approach? Thank you. This is for the whole panel. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 2 or 3 and then go back to the panel. The question number 1 over there, please.
Hello, my name is Ala Olyum. I'm from the European Union delegation in Riyadh that also covers Qatar. I'd like to ask the panel about the wider effects of the Gulf crisis, and specifically on the Red Sea. We have the Prime Minister of Somalia here. I think we have noticed some rivalry or perhaps competition between Gulf countries for influence in the Red Sea, and recently in Riyadh there was the meeting setting up a new regional council on the Red Sea. Could you please comment on that, any of the panelists?
Okay, and then there is number 3 back there.
My name is Sami Larian from Turkey. My question is for the United Nations. When it was created 73 years ago, it was basically projecting the power structure at the time, but now things have changed. How could it be relevant to the people if it's only one country that is dominating its agenda, and whatever its will, it's imposed, and it never really solves any problems? That's why most people don't see any relevancy to it, particularly when it comes to the Palestinian situation. And one other question to the Foreign Minister about normalization. The Arab Peace Initiative initially said that would be no normalization until the withdrawal. Now we see some Gulf countries and others who are basically sidestepping the issue of withdrawal into the issue of normalization. What do you think that would affect the overall security situation in the area? And finally, for the foreign minister in Romania, why is the European Union not taking more assertive situation regarding the Palestinian question? Why is it always giving deference to the United States and its full support to Israel? And we saw that recently in several UN votes. Thank you.
Okay, you were supposed to ask one question, you asked three, and now we go to the last question, then we have to go back to the panel. The number 4 over there.
Yes, thank you. My name is Abdullah Ba'bood. I am from Oman. I don't want to turn this into an EU or European bashing, but since this has been raised, my question to the panel is, what has Europe done to the region? We have heard so many policies, incoherent policies, diverse policies, Mediterranean policy, an EU GCC policy, a policy towards Iraq, one towards Yemen, but there is no coherency overall to the whole region. And what can they do, not only in this crisis, but to help the region to move towards more integration and cooperation? And to follow from that, what is left from the GCC, which is a regional-based, rule-based organization, through this blockade that actually contradicts all the agreements that have been signed in terms especially of the common market, which allows free flow of people, capital, and goods to be transferred between the different countries. This blockade has actually undermined the whole of this. So what is left of the GCC, and how can people respect the GCC if it doesn't respect its own rules? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great questions, very little time to answer. I'm going to have to, I'm sorry to say, I'm going to have to limit each one of you to something like 1 minute. So, you know, don't try to answer all the questions, but just pick 1 or 2, and we'll start with Madam President and go through the panel. So why don't you start, please?
This is working now. Yeah. So very quickly, in 1 minute, that's quite a challenge. But I will answer the question that was addressed directly to the United Nations. And indeed, I think that the world has changed. As when we drafted the UN Charter 73 years ago, the world has changed. We have new challenges. We have new issues on the agenda, but the principles remain the same. Peace, security, human rights, and development. I think that these are the pillars that we need to deliver, and we need to be relevant to all people. The question was, why is that the UN doesn't act, for example, on the Palestinian issue? And I have to tell you that the General Assembly has taken over, you know, in just 2 examples, a special session, emergency special session last year when the decision to locate the embassies in Jerusalem, that was an issue that could not be resolved by the Security Council, that came in an emergency special session to the General Assembly and was addressed by all member states. And we saw the result of the voting pattern, which you know, a larger majority really called for the respect of the already existing resolutions regarding the Palestinian issue. And last week, recently, there was a resolution on Hamas that was put forward by the United States. We had a voting process in the General Assembly, and the resolution was not approved by the majority of the member states. What I want to say is that the General Assembly is the parliament of humanity, the norm-setting body of the organization, and we can make the difference. And why is that we can make the difference? Precisely because of every member state at the General Assembly, we all sit in the same seats. They're all the same. We have all the same microphone to speak. We have the right to speak, all of us, 193 plus 3 observer member states, and we have the same button to vote. So this parliament of humanity has to deliver better, of course. We are in a process of revitalizing the work of the General Assembly, but it is indeed the most democratic body. And there have been several gains and several achievements of the multilateral system. I don't have the time to go through them, but just think, climate change, think the Sustainable Development Goals, international treaties on disarmament, the conventions, the treaty bodies for human rights, the conventions on persons with disabilities, etc., you name it. There are a list of achievements, but sometimes we tend to focus on the shortcomings and the challenges. And I think I'm fully committed to making the United Nations more relevant to the people we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. We're rapidly running out of time, Mr. Foreign Minister.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I can cover all the questions, but I know that we are running out of time. Just two, I think, quick comment. One on the Middle East and the Arab Peace Initiative, and the other one on the GCC agreement. I think these are the more relevant to us here. Regarding the Arab Peace Initiative, this is an initiative which is supported by all the Arab countries, which is requiring the recognition of the state of Israel in exchange of their full withdrawal from all the 1967 lands and the territories of the Palestinian. Now, since the Arab Peace Initiative been laid, there is no breakthrough in the negotiations. There is no any movement. And this doesn't justify the Israelis' actions against the Palestinian people, against the innocent people over there, and also doesn't justify that some of the Arab countries, they go for the normalization before or overcoming the Palestinian issue. We believe that the Palestinian issue will remain at the center of the relation between any country in this region and Israel, despite the connections and the communications which is maybe happening right now between countries. We hope that it will be used for the good of the peace process and will help in bringing peace at the end of the day. But the full normalization, we don't see it will be fruitful unless we get what's mentioned in the Arab Peace Initiative. This is for the lasting peace. Regarding the GCC and the way how this regional alliance has been undermined by this crisis, this is something we totally agree with. That's why when we mentioned about regional alliances here, that these regional alliances needs to be reshaped and to be redesigned, that a new governance principles need to be put in place. There's a full participation of all members in shaping this governance structure, and should be a binding structure for all the countries. Today, GCC and the Secretariat of the GCC, they have no teeth. They have nothing. They don't know how to resolve any issue. They have mechanisms in place. They never triggered these mechanisms because some countries, they believe those are non-binding mechanisms for them. But we need to make sure that all the rules and principles that we are submitting to, that is binding to everybody in this region, and should have a clear dispute resolution mechanism to be put in place, that all the results will be binding to hold all the countries accountable for anything they have done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister, please try to be brief also. I think they will make me suffer, the organizers, because I go into overtime.
Thank you. As I've said earlier, new alliances are happening as a result of either conflict or seeking economic influence or engaging in competition. That said, therefore, it is very apparent now that any conflict that takes one part of the world has direct impact on other parts of the world. The issue of the GCC is impacting us politically, economically, security-wise, which in reality means that the world cannot stand idle and watch conflicts unfold, as it will have an impact. The issue of the IMF's forecast on economic slowdown, it is very important, therefore, we think of preventive strategy, which hasn't been the case. In the case of the European Union, I think there's a major role for the European Union, which they can play, and I hope now with you taking the leadership, you will take that as an advantage. And in the case of Somalia, I would like to admit that the European Union is actually investing in Somalia, and they are taking a leadership role. And we see that as an example of where the European Union as an institution is functioning. Finally, the world is as good as its leaders. And if we are not able to agree on global warming or preventive strategy on poverty, then I think it is time that we not solve a crisis, but come together as early stage so that we can debate all these issues.
Thank you very much. The last word goes to Romania.
Yes, I'll try to be extremely brief. There was the first question, multilateralism and bilateralism. It's obvious that the big economies, the biggest economies in the world, they are more tempted to work on a bilateral level in comparison with the multilateral level. That's why, from our point of view, the European Union is one of the strongest supporters of the idea of the multilateralism and will continue to promote it, even if sometimes there are problems in the relations with even some of our important partners. Secondly, Palestinian question. I think it's wrong to say that the European Union was taking the side of Israel in comparison with Palestine. On the contrary, I can assure you that the peace process in the Middle East at the level of the European Union is one of the top priorities. We are waiting, of course, to have a peace plan maybe by April delivered by the United States, but the European Union is already preparing for some initiatives on people movement. And I can tell you very directly that the basic approach of the European Union is the idea of two states living in peace and security in that region. Yesterday, I had a meeting with Minister Malki of Palestine, together with 6 other ministers. We had a joint commission, and we signed some agreements in the cultural, educational field and others, health, care, emergency activities. I don't want to prolong it, but we had a very good discussion with Mr. Malki, and it's obvious that Palestinians are ready to enter into a dialogue, and the support of the European Union will be there. About the JCC, yes, I think from our point of view, as I said, the only approach is the political negotiations. But I have to add, it has to respect the principles and rules of the international law, and especially the equality of all the members of the JCC. This is practically very fast. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask the audience to give a round of applause to this panel? I want to thank all 4 of you for these really interesting contributions. I think this was a quick overview over some of the pressing global and regional issues. I think we could have spent another hour or more on this. Thank you very much for participating. I apologize to the organizers for going into a bit of overtime, but I think it was worth it. Thank you very much.